The sound of Emma's footsteps echoed on the crimson carpet leading to the opulent wedding venue. Curious, probing eyes immediately fixed on her. Emma, in a form-fitting black dress, stepped out of the luxury car beside Daniel. For a brief moment, it felt as if time had stopped, the soft whispers of the guests fading into the background. A woman nearby muttered under her breath, "Who is she?" Sarah, the bride, stood not far off, her eyes wide in shock as she watched Daniel confidently stride alongside a woman she had never seen before. The strained smile on her face faded as Emma locked eyes with her, unfazed. Emma offered a subtle smile, one shrouded in mystery, as if holding a secret no one could ever understand. "Remember what I told you," Daniel whispered, his eyes briefly flicking to Emma before he turned away. "Tonight, we're not just guests. We are the center of attention." Emma didn't reply, but her demeanor spoke volumes. She wasn't just accompanying Daniel to the event, she was here to prove something. As Emma stepped through the grand doors of the hall, the glittering lights illuminated her figure, and the murmurs grew louder. People tried to guess who she was, but no one dared approach. Only Sarah, standing there with a cold glare, couldn't hide her surprise and subtle wariness. Welcome to a story not just about hidden emotions, but a journey of rediscovering self-worth. If you enjoy unexpected stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe to continue exploring with us. Now, let's discover what led Emma into this wedding and made her someone no one can ignore. Daniel Anderson, a millionaire who once had everything at his feet, now found himself facing an invitation to his ex-wife Sarah's wedding to another man. The pain of loss was overwhelming, yet as always, Daniel refused to show any weakness. He needed a plan, a way to prove to everyone, especially Sarah, that he was unaffected. Suddenly, his attention shifted to Emma, the maid, who was organizing papers in the room. Emma was young, beautiful, and had a natural look, a perfect fit for his plan. "Emma, come here," he commanded, his tone sharp. Emma hesitated, but put down her work and walked over. "What do you need, Mr. Anderson?" she asked politely, as she always did. "Yes, I need you to accompany me to an event." "It's a private matter," he suggested, though the request sounded ridiculous. Emma looked at him, surprised and confused. "Mr. Anderson, I'm your maid, not an escort." Daniel chuckled softly, as if her reaction was exactly what he had expected. "I'm not asking you, Emma. I'm offering you an opportunity. You'll be paid handsomely for this. All you need to do is come with me, look beautiful and say little." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Though the offer was somewhat insulting, the money Daniel promised was hard to resist. She had been working for him for nearly 2 years, and while she knew how to handle his harshness, she never thought she'd receive an offer like this. She thought of her mounting debts and the course she wanted to start. "Why me?" she asked. Daniel met her gaze directly. "Because you're simple, discreet," he paused, "and different from the people who will be there." His response sounded more like a disguised insult than a compliment, but Emma swallowed her pride. "All right, I agree," she said after a brief silence, "but just for one night." Daniel smiled in satisfaction. "Great, we have a lot to do." As Emma left the room, doubt crept into her mind. What consequences awaited her for agreeing to this deal with such an unpredictable man? The next morning, Emma barely had time to think about what she had agreed to. Daniel quickly took control of the situation. A luxury car arrived to pick her up right outside her door, taking her straight to a high-end fashion store in the city center. As soon as she entered, a stylist greeted her, looking as stern as Daniel. "Ms. Emma, we're going to transform you," the woman said with a scrutinizing glance as clothes, shoes, and accessories were brought out. Emma felt like she was on a makeover reality show. Each item selected seemed to remind her of the vast difference between Daniel's world and hers. She tried to refuse the heels that she could barely balance in, but no one paid attention to her objections. Daniel arrived shortly after, eyeing everything with a critical gaze. "She needs to look elegant, but not too fake," Daniel declared, while the stylist nodded. Emma crossed her arms, feeling uncomfortable. "Maybe I can choose something that feels comfortable," she suggested. Daniel gave a brief laugh. "This isn't about comfort, Emma. It's about making an impression. His words made Emma's blood boil, but she knew arguing would be pointless. Accepting this deal meant following his rules, at least for now. After hours of adjustments and trying on clothes, Daniel finally agreed on a chic black dress that accentuated Emma's natural beauty. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman reflected back. For a brief moment, she felt strong. "That's it," Daniel said, assessing her as though she were a completed work of art. "It all seems a bit much," Emma remarked, hesitant. Daniel turned back, his eyes fixed on her. "Sarah can't doubt that you're my choice." His ex-wife's name hung in the air like a silent reminder of why all of this was happening. The next morning, Daniel hired an etiquette expert to train Emma on how to behave like someone from the upper class. 4 hours, she was instructed on how to walk, how to smile, and even how to hold a champagne glass. The effort left her exhausted, but also frustrated. "I can hold a glass without help," she protested after dropping a third glass. Daniel, observing from a distance, simply shook his head. "You're here to make an impression, not to act ordinary." Emma took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Then why does all of this matter to you? You already have everything: money, power, respect." For a moment, Daniel seemed taken aback by her question, but quickly regained his impassive expression. "There are things money can't buy, Emma. Let's just say this is personal." His response didn't convince her, but she decided not to press further. Clearly, there was something in his story he hadn't shared. That evening, before the wedding, Daniel appeared with a more serious expression than usual. "Tomorrow, all eyes will be on us. Don't let there be any doubts or mistakes." Emma looked at him, tired from the continuous training and relentless demands. "Daniel, why does it matter to you so much? Sarah is just your ex-wife." He chuckled coldly. "Sarah isn't just my ex. She's the only one who challenged me and thought she could replace me." Emma realized that beneath Daniel's confident exterior lay insecurities he desperately tried to conceal. This wasn't just about Sarah, it was about wounded pride, control, and the need to prove no one could surpass him. "So, it's all just about stroking your ego then?" she challenged him. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "I don't expect you to understand, Emma. Just follow the plan." The tension between them was palpable, but Emma chose not to prolong the argument. She knew that whatever happened, her patience would be tested like never before. On the morning of the wedding, Emma was ready with help from a team Daniel had hired. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and the dress looked like something out of a fairy tale. When she looked in the mirror, she forgot everything: the plan, Daniel, Sarah. Her feelings were different now, more confident. Daniel found her just before they left. He was in a perfectly tailored suit, and for the first time, Emma realized that despite his unbearable personality, he still stood out. "You look presentable," he said, trying to appear indifferent, though Emma noticed the faint smile on his lips. "Thank you, I think so too," she replied, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Throughout the ride to the wedding, silence enveloped them. Emma tried to mask the tension inside as she prepared to step into a world that wasn't hers, beside a man who seemed incapable of feeling anything real. When they arrived, Daniel looked at her one last time before stepping out of the car. "Remember, Emma, today you're my companion. Act like you were born for this." Emma took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I don't need to act, Daniel. Just need to survive this evening." As soon as Emma stepped out of the car, whispers began to spread. All eyes at the wedding turned to her and Daniel. The sleek black dress hugged her body, and the confident stride she had practiced for hours seemed to have worked. Daniel walked beside her with his usual air of arrogance, but this time there was something more: pride. Emma quickly realized she was in a foreign place. The guests were powerful businessmen, socialites, and a few faces from the entertainment world. Sarah, the bride, stood in the distance, laughing with a group of friends. Emma felt a tightness in her chest. It wasn't fear, but the sense that she didn't belong here, among people living in a completely different world. "Don't let anyone intimidate you," Daniel whispered in her ear, as if reading her thoughts. Emma held her head high as they made their way to the banquet. Soon after, an older man with a bright smile approached them. "Daniel, I didn't expect to see you here, and with such a charming companion," the man said. Daniel shook his hand. "Of course I'm here, George. After all, Sarah and I share history." The comment made Emma raise an eyebrow, but she stayed silent, offering a polite smile. As dinner began, Emma noticed that Daniel was exceptionally skilled at maintaining shallow conversations, always exuding an air of superiority. As for her, she did her best to keep up. Eventually, Sarah approached them. Her smile was as sharp as the sparkling white dress she wore. "Daniel, what a surprise," she said, eyeing Emma from head to toe. "Who is your companion?" Before Daniel could answer, Emma extended her hand. "Emma, nice to meet you." Sarah seemed surprised by Emma's confidence but still shook her hand. "Nice to meet you. I didn't expect Daniel to bring someone as charming as you." Clearly irritated by Sarah's tone, Daniel cut in. "Emma is a wonderful companion. She understands me in ways few can." Sarah squinted, examining Emma as if searching for a weakness in her flawless demeanor. "Interesting. We should talk later, Emma. I want to know more about you." Emma nodded, though she knew the invitation was not as innocent as it seemed. As the night wore on, Emma felt more and more out of place. The whispers, the scrutinizing glances, and a few women clearly mocking her behind her back. Her throat went dry, and her hands began to sweat, but she tried to stay calm, reminding herself to get through the night with whatever dignity she had left. When the music began, Daniel approached and extended his hand. "You did well, now we need to dance." Emma hesitated, her feet feeling heavy. "I don't know how to dance," she said, but he pulled her onto the floor. "Trust me," he said, gripping her hand tightly. As Emma followed him, a chill ran through her body. She hadn't expected Daniel to be such a good dancer. He guided her as if it came naturally. Emma stumbled a few times but gradually found her rhythm. Throughout the dance, she felt his eyes on her. An indescribable sensation surged within her, making her forget everything around her. "You're doing better than I expected," Daniel remarked, breaking the silence. Emma laughed softly, her breath quickening as she tried to hide her anxiety. "You're a better dancer than I thought," she replied. Their conversation was interrupted when Sarah approached. "Daniel, may I borrow you for a moment?" Daniel seemed to hesitate for a second before nodding. "All right, but don't take too long." Emma followed Sarah to a more secluded corner. The bride wore a calculating smile, and Emma felt that the decisive moment had arrived. "So, who are you?" Sarah began, crossing her arms. "Where did Daniel find you?" Emma remained calm, her voice steady. "Sorry, I don't understand the question." Sarah took a step closer. "Oh, you know exactly what I mean. Daniel has a knack for choosing the right people. You seem to fit in." Emma felt her blood boil, but she kept her composure. "I think Daniel can speak for his own choices," she replied, her sharp tone surprising Sarah. The bride smiled faintly. "He's always been a fan of challenges." "Good luck, girl." Emma returned to the table, feeling uneasy but doing her best to mask it. Daniel immediately noticed something was wrong. "What did Sarah say?" he asked, concern in his eyes. "It's nothing I can't handle," Emma answered, not wanting to go into detail. Later, as everyone enjoyed the speeches, Emma noticed Daniel seemed uncomfortable. While people praised Sarah and her new husband, he appeared distant, his jaw tense. When their eyes met, Emma smiled faintly, trying to ease the tension. Daniel turned away, but he seemed less rigid. As the event finally wrapped up, Daniel and Emma bid farewell to the guests. On their way to the car, he broke the silence. "You did better than I thought." "Thank you, I thought so too," Emma replied. "No, I really mean it," Daniel hesitated, unsure how to finish his sentence. "You were perfect." Emma wasn't sure how to respond, but a strange warmth spread through her chest. Despite Daniel's arrogance and controlling nature that often annoyed her, there were moments like this that made her question who he truly was. However, before she could think more about it, she knew something had changed that night, and the consequences of it had only just begun. The next morning, Emma woke up still trying to process the events of the wedding. The whole night had been a whirlwind of emotions, and while she had impressed some, There was something unsettling about Daniel's attitude. He seemed caught in a cycle of pride and insecurity, which caused him to lose control, especially when Sarah was around. Daniel wasted no time. That morning, he had a meeting with potential investors. However, whispers about his appearance with Emma at the wedding quickly spread. Some guests, particularly Sarah's close friends, were curious about who the woman was. Sarah, seizing the opportunity, began fueling the rumors in a conversation with an influential investor. She hinted that Emma might not be as simple as she seemed. Daniel always has a strange preference for his allies. Is she here for her abilities or just for convenience? She said, her tone laced with malice. The rumors spread, and not long after, one of the investors approached Daniel during lunch. The girl at the wedding, Emma, right? She seems very decisive. Something tells me she's got ambitions that go beyond yours. Daniel, already annoyed by Sarah's provocations, felt a stab to his pride. He knew Emma wasn't a threat, but the insecurity bubbling within him, combined with what he had heard that morning, made him overreact. That afternoon, Emma was called into Daniel's office. As soon as she walked in, she could feel the tension. He sat behind his desk, his eyes focused on a pile of paperwork, but his expression was grim. "You wanted to see me?" Emma asked, trying to keep her composure. Daniel looked up. "Yes, we need to clear something up." She walked closer, bracing herself for the worst. "What's going on?" Daniel threw some papers onto the desk. "The rumors about you talking to investors at the wedding, what did you say to them?" Emma was stunned. "Talk to investors? I only spoke to Sarah and a few people who came over to introduce themselves." "Then what did you discuss with them?" he pressed, his voice filled with suspicion. Emma felt her blood boil. "Discuss? Daniel, all I did was exactly what you asked of me. I stayed by your side the whole time, except when Sarah wanted to talk to me." He stood up abruptly, slamming his hand on the desk. "So, it's Sarah's fault? Of course, she's trying to do something, and you fall into her trap." Emma crossed her arms, looking at him with skepticism. "You're blaming me for things I had no idea were happening. You've gone too far." He ignored her explanation and continued shouting. "I trusted you with a simple task, but clearly, you couldn't help but attract more attention than necessary." His accusation shocked Emma. "Are you saying my presence hurt you? You're the one who put me in this situation." Daniel took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, but the anger overtook him. "Emma, I think it's best we stop here. Consider yourself fired." Emma stood frozen for a moment. "Fired? You're firing me?" "Yes, clearly our relationship isn't working anymore." His words were a slap in the face to Emma. She could feel her self-respect colliding with her fury, but she realized arguing with Daniel was futile. "Fine, if that's your decision, I'll accept it. But remember this, Daniel, you're making a huge mistake." She turned and walked out of the room, holding her head high, though inside, everything felt like it was falling apart. This wasn't just about losing her job, it was about how he treated her, discarding her as if she were worthless. The following days were tough for Emma. Although she was angry, she knew she needed to rise above it. Without a job, her savings wouldn't last long. But instead of feeling defeated, she decided to use this situation as motivation to change her life. Emma began working on a project she had long dreamed of: sustainable decor using recycled materials. She created a small collection of products, and her work quickly gained attention on social media. Within weeks, her business started to gain traction, and orders began to pour in. Meanwhile, Daniel faced mounting pressure in the company. His insecurity due to Sarah's presence and the rumors from the wedding continued to erode his reputation. Though he wouldn't admit it, he found himself thinking about Emma more often. There was something about her, the determination he saw in her eyes when she left the room, that he couldn't forget. One morning, while reviewing financial reports, Daniel received an email that took him by surprise. It was an article on a design website praising the work of a new entrepreneur, Emma. He clicked on the link and saw photos of her creations. The products were so creative, full of personality, and reflected who she truly was. For a moment, he felt a mixture of admiration and insecurity. Emma was thriving on her own, while his life seemed to be spiraling out of control. That evening, Daniel attended a business event, but he felt distant during a conversation. He overheard someone mention Emma's name. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape her influence. He decided that he needed to see her. While Emma tirelessly worked to grow her business, the pain and wounded pride from being fired by Daniel turned into fuel for her drive. She knew she didn't need his or anyone else's approval to succeed. But when she heard the sound of a message notification on her phone, her heart seemed to stop. It was a message from Daniel. Emma stared at Daniel's message for a few seconds, her heart racing. After weeks of silence, he finally wanted to talk. What did he want after so easily discarding her? Determined not to let it affect her, Emma ignored the message and refocused on her work. The small space she had set up in her living room was beginning to feel cramped. Orders for her sustainable decor were increasing daily, and she could barely keep up with the demand. Fatigue spread throughout Emma's body, but it also made her feel like she was finally taking control of her life. Meanwhile, Daniel couldn't focus. Emma had refused his attempts to reach out, and that frustrated him more than he was willing to admit. He tried to convince himself that his growing interest in her was just curiosity. After all, not everyone who was fired by him could walk away and succeed on their own. But there was something he couldn't forget: the look in her eyes during their last conversation, when she stood up to him with courage and determination. It was a stark contrast to the people around him, who always flattered or cared only about what he could give them. Emma was different, and that intrigued him. "Mr. Anderson," his assistant's voice broke through his thoughts. "The investor you mentioned wants to schedule a meeting." Daniel nodded, but his mind remained with Emma. "Okay, schedule it for tomorrow," he said, though his thoughts kept drifting back to her. He decided he needed to see her in person, not to apologize, something he wasn't ready to do, but to understand how she managed to bounce back so quickly. The next morning, as Emma was arranging a new order, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Daniel on the other side. She took a deep breath before opening the door. "What are you doing here?" she asked, arms crossed. Daniel looked as perfect as ever, but there was something softer in his gaze. "We need to talk." Emma let out a short, bitter laugh. "You've made your feelings clear about me, Daniel. I don't see any reason for us to talk." "I was wrong," he said, surprising her. "About a lot of things." Emma raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Is this an apology?" He hesitated before nodding. "Basically, yes. I acted impulsively, and I was unfair to you." "Impulsive and unfair?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You accused me of things I didn't do, insulted me, and fired me without listening." Daniel lowered his head, clearly uncomfortable. "I know I was a jerk." Emma took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What do you want, Daniel? You here to hire another pawn for your selfish plans?" He shook his head, frustrated. "No. I've seen what you do, Emma. Your work is amazing. I had to come see you." "And what else?" she interrupted. "Do you want credit for my success?" Daniel stepped back, as if her words had struck him. "No, I just want to say that I admire what you do. You got up even after everything I did." The sincerity in his voice hit her like a punch. She stood there for a moment, trying to figure out what he wanted. Daniel, who always seemed so confident, now stood before her with an expression she had never seen before: vulnerability. "Admiration doesn't change anything, Daniel," Emma said firmly. "I built all of this on my own, without anyone's help, and you were just an obstacle I had to get past." He nodded, accepting her words. "I know. But I hope one day you'll forgive me." Emma didn't respond. She simply closed the door, leaving Daniel standing outside. In the following days, Emma threw herself into her work, trying to forget about her encounter with Daniel. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't deny that thoughts of him kept invading her mind. The way he had sincerely apologized was something she hadn't expected. Meanwhile, Daniel was determined to make things right. He began learning more about Emma's work and realized the positive impact she was having with her creations. Inspired by her, he decided to use his influence to support sustainable projects, something he'd never considered before. In a meeting with a group of investors, he presented a proposal to fund small entrepreneurs with creative ideas. "We need more projects that make a difference," he said, even surprising himself. Meanwhile, Emma received an unexpected invitation to showcase her work at a local design event. This was her first opportunity to present her creations to a larger audience, and though nervous, she felt excited. On the night of the event, while she was arranging her pieces, she sensed a familiar presence behind her. She turned around to see Daniel. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. "I came to support you," he replied sincerely. "And before you say anything, I'm not here to steal your moment." Emma crossed her arms, still doubtful. "Why?" "Because I believe in you," he answered simply. Those words, though unexpected, didn't seem like empty words. Emma looked at him for a moment, trying to find any sign that he had another motive, but all she saw was sincerity. "You really are persistent, Daniel," she said finally. "But I still don't know if I can trust you." He smiled slightly. "Not asking you to trust me right away. I just hope I get the chance to prove that I can do better." The event was a success, and Emma received praise and proposals from new clients. Though still hesitant, she couldn't deny that Daniel's presence had helped attract attention to her work. As the night drew to a close, he approached her again. "If you ever need help expanding your business, know that I'm willing to invest," he said. Emma shook her head. "I don't need your money, Daniel. If one day I accept your help, it will be because I trust you, not because I depend on it." Daniel nodded, respecting her decision. "Then I'll try to earn your trust." For the first time, Emma saw something different in Daniel. Maybe, just maybe, he was actually changing. The exhibition was a milestone in Emma's life, not just for the opportunities it brought, but because it was the first time she felt the impact of her work extending beyond social media. Still, Daniel's unexpected support left her feeling conflicted. She tried not to think about him, but somehow, he was determined to be a part of her journey. In the following days, Emma stayed busy with new orders and collaboration offers from local designers. But her encounter with Daniel at the event continued to linger in her mind. He had shown a kindness she had never seen before, but she knew that with him, kindness alone wasn't enough to erase the past. She continued working on a new collection. Emma's phone rang and it was an unknown number, but she decided to pick up. "Hello, Emma. This is Marcy from Urban Deco Designs. We'd like to invite you to lead a collaborative project with a major company. Your work is exactly what we're looking for." Emma could hardly believe her ears. Urban Deco Designs was one of the leading sustainable design companies, known for its collaborations with major brands. "I'm thrilled." "Which company is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly with surprise. "It's Anderson Enterprises," Marcy replied. The mention of the company name caused Emma's heart to stop for a moment. Of course, it was an irony she couldn't put into words. She fought to maintain her composure. "I'll need some time to think about it," Emma responded, trying to keep her tone professional. "We understand, but this could be a huge opportunity for you to expand your work. Please consider it and let me know your decision by tomorrow." Emma ended the call, her mind racing as she tried to process the situation. Working with Daniel meant facing everything she had been trying to forget, but this opportunity was too significant to pass up. The next morning, Emma made her decision and sent a message confirming her participation in the project. Just hours later, she received the project details and an invitation to meet at Anderson Enterprises headquarters. When she arrived at the towering building, she felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She wasn't here to renew personal relationships. She was here as a professional. She stepped into the elevator, her heart pounding, and was escorted to the meeting room. As soon as she entered, she saw Daniel standing by a table full of reports. His gaze immediately locked with hers. For a moment he seemed surprised, but then he smiled. "Hello, Emma," he said. She kept her composure. "I'm here for the project." Daniel nodded, seeming to respect the boundary she had set. "Of course, I want you to see this as a collaboration. Your ideas will be vital." The meeting proceeded objectively. Daniel presented the project, a sustainable office building designed to minimize environmental impact. Emma took notes, keeping everything professional, though she noticed that Daniel was trying particularly hard to highlight her contributions, something he had never done before. After the meeting, he escorted her out. "Thank you for agreeing to work with us," he said sincerely. "I'm here for the project," Emma replied, "but that doesn't change the past." Daniel sighed as if he understood. "I know, but I hope over time we can start fresh." Emma didn't respond, only nodded and walked away, determined to stay focused on the work. In the following days, Emma threw herself into the project. She led the creative team with determination, and her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Her meetings with Daniel became more frequent, but they remained strictly professional. He seemed different, more cooperative, less domineering. One day, during a meeting, Emma presented a bold idea for the interior design. One of the investors expressed concern. "This seems quite risky. Why should we trust this approach?" Before Emma could respond, Daniel spoke up. "Because I trust her work. Emma has experience and vision. If she believes this is the best direction for the project, I trust that it's the right choice." Daniel's public support took Emma by surprise, but she didn't show it. She calmly continued explaining her proposal, eventually convincing the investor to agree. After the meeting, she confronted Daniel. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Because it was the right thing to do," he replied, as if it were obvious. "Since when do you care about what's right?" Emma retorted challengingly. Daniel smiled softly. "Since I realized how wrong I've been about so many things." Emma didn't know how to respond. His sincerity left her feeling uncomfortable. As the project progressed, their meetings began to change. Daniel became more open, and despite her hesitation, Emma began to see a side of him she never imagined. He surprised her with small gestures, like bringing coffee to meetings or praising her work in front of the team. One evening, after a long day of work, Daniel invited her to dinner. "It's not about work," he said, sensing her hesitation. "Just a conversation between two people." Emma thought for a moment and then agreed. At the restaurant, the conversation was relaxed. Daniel spoke about his childhood, his challenges, and taking over the company, even sharing regrets he never thought he would. "I always thought success was everything," he said thoughtfully. "But recently, I've realized that maybe it's not enough. Success means nothing if you don't have anyone to share it with." Emma responded without much thought. "True." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the depth in her words. "You're right," she said, and their gaze held a silent intensity. But Emma quickly turned away, trying to maintain emotional distance. She wasn't ready to lower her guard. The next day, Emma was surprised to hear news that one of her decorative pieces had been featured in a design magazine as part of the project. Daniel had made sure to publicly praise her, further elevating her visibility. However, Emma realized that, despite everything progressing, a part of her still couldn't fully trust Daniel. His change seemed genuine, but a part of her still wondered if it was just a calculated facade. As the project advanced, Emma knew the biggest challenge was still ahead, deciding whether Daniel truly deserved a second chance. Emma stood in the meeting room, presenting the progress of her sustainable building design ideas. The project had come a long way, and the confidence she had earned from the team and investors was evident. Every detail she proposed was met with praise, and even those who had once underestimated her were now convinced by her vision. Daniel, sitting at the head of the table, silently watched her. He rarely intervened in Emma's presentations, but he always made sure to show his support. His gaze followed her, not just for her professionalism, but for something else. When the meeting ended, Emma felt Daniel's familiar presence approaching. "You did very well," he said as they walked down the hall. "Thank you," Emma replied, keeping her tone neutral. Daniel paused for a moment before speaking again. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night, about success and the people you share it with." Emma stopped and turned to face him. "Daniel, I'm here to work. Don't blur the lines." He shook his head, as if holding back something he truly wanted to say. "Yes, but maybe one day you'll understand what I'm trying to point out." Emma didn't respond, simply turned away and walked on, trying not to acknowledge the strange feeling his words stirred in her. As the project neared its final stages, Emma began noticing some irregularities. In the financial reports, some budget decisions seemed contradictory to the sustainability message Daniel had always emphasized. It was something she couldn't ignore. That afternoon, she went straight to his office. "Daniel, can we talk?" He looked up from his computer, surprised by her straightforward tone. "Sure, what's going on?" Emma placed the papers on his desk. "These numbers don't make sense. How can we talk about sustainability when we're cutting essential costs for it?" Daniel picked up the reports and studied them in silence. "I'll double-check with the finance department," he said, but Emma could hear the hesitation in his voice. "You knew about this, didn't you?" she asked, her voice laced with disappointment. He placed the papers down and took a deep breath. "It's not an easy decision, Emma, but we need to balance the budget." Emma stared at him, struggling to believe what she was hearing. "You're sacrificing the integrity of the project to please the investors. Aren't you deceiving yourself?" "It's not that simple," Daniel replied, his tone edged with frustration. "I have my responsibilities and principles." Emma's voice was unwavering as she responded. "If you don't believe in what you're doing, then this project will never be genuine." Daniel fell silent, his expression shaken by her words. That night, Emma decided she needed answers. Daniel had always been a complex person, but lately his actions seemed to carry more depth. She began researching some of the companies involved in the project and discovered that most of them had long-standing ties to Daniel and his father. The next day, she confronted him again. "Daniel, why have you invested so much into this project? It's not just about sustainability, is it?" He turned away as if trying to avoid the question. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters," Emma insisted. "If you want me to trust you, you need to be honest with me." Finally, Daniel sighed, closing his eyes for a moment before speaking. "This project is a way for me to redeem what my father did. He always prioritized profit, and it hurt a lot of people. I grew up thinking that was the only way, but I don't want to repeat his mistakes." Emma listened in silence, taking in his words. For the first time, she saw Daniel as someone vulnerable, someone struggling with his past. "Then do it differently," she said, her voice firm. "Prove you can do better." In the days that followed, Daniel took steps to adjust the budget, knowing that it might upset some of the investors. Emma could see that he was genuinely trying to change, but there was still a barrier she couldn't cross. As they worked together, they began sharing more project ideas. Emma opened up about her impoverished childhood, the challenges of caring for her family, and her dream of using her creativity to make a meaningful impact. Daniel, in turn, talked about the pressure of growing up in his father's shadow, the failure of his relationship with Sarah, and how meeting Emma had changed the way he saw many things. "You've made me realize that success means nothing if you lose the people who truly matter," he admitted during a break. Emma's heart raced, but she kept a composed expression. "Daniel, change takes time. It's not enough to just say you'll do better, you have to prove it," she replied. He nodded. "And I will." At a project progress event, Emma was approached by Sarah, who seemed to always find a way to confront Daniel. "It looks like you've gained more than just a job," Sarah said, her smile laced with mischief. Emma took a deep breath, maintaining her calm. "I've worked hard to earn this position, Sarah. Maybe you should try doing the same." Sarah laughed, as though Emma's response amused her. "Daniel can be charming when he wants to, but in the end he always returns to his true nature, a man driven by his ego. Good luck trying to change that." Emma didn't respond, but Sarah's words left her uneasy. No matter how hard Daniel tried, the doubts inside her wouldn't fade. Those doubts only grew when he approached her shortly after, his expression filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Sarah has a special talent for annoying people," Emma replied, trying to make light of the situation. Daniel sighed. "Don't let her get to you. She's always trying to hurt me, and now she thinks targeting you is how to do that." "Why?" Emma challenged, locking eyes with him. "Does she think I'm important to you?" Daniel paused for a moment before answering. "Because you are important to me." Those simple words carried so much weight. Emma didn't know how to respond. Daniel seemed to be trying to clarify his feelings, but she still wasn't ready to trust him. In the following days, Emma focused on her work, but Daniel's words kept circling in her mind. He had made it clear, she mattered to him. Though his words seemed sincere, Emma knew she couldn't rely solely on them. She wanted to trust him, but her instincts kept her on guard. As the project continued to progress, an important presentation event was scheduled, where investors, partners, and industry leaders would gather. It was a critical moment to solidify Emma's efforts and secure financial backing for the final phase. She prepared meticulously, knowing how crucial that night would be. Meanwhile, Daniel grew increasingly closer. He not only trusted her decisions but also supported her in every small detail. Occasionally, Emma caught him watching her during meetings, but she avoided meeting his gaze. Their relationship was fragile, and Emma knew that one wrong move could bring it all crashing down. On the night of the event, Emma arrived at the venue in a simple yet elegant dress, reflecting her personality. The guests were eager to hear the presentation, and Emma struggled to keep calm, her mind constantly reviewing every detail. Daniel arrived shortly after, impeccably dressed as usual but seeming more relaxed than usual. He walked toward Emma as soon as he saw her. "You look amazing," he said, his tone unfamiliar, as though he couldn't keep the usual composure. "Thank you," Emma replied, trying to keep the conversation neutral. Before she could say more, Sarah appeared, a smile on her face that couldn't hide her intent to provoke Emma. "What a surprising turn of events," she said, scanning the room. "Looks like you've really found your place here." "I've worked hard to earn it," Emma responded, not allowing herself to be intimidated. Sarah turned to Daniel. "So, what about you, Daniel? Are you still trying to prove something to me?" Daniel remained calm, but his voice was firm. "Sarah, I don't have anything to prove to you, and Emma doesn't need your approval to be here." Emma watched the exchange, feeling a mix of satisfaction and unease. Daniel had openly sided with her, but facing Sarah seemed to reopen old wounds. As the event continued, Emma presented her vision for the final phase of the project. The room fell silent as she explained each detail designed to reflect the values of sustainability and innovation. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Daniel was the first to rise, followed by investors and partners. Emma felt a swell of pride, but she knew the night was far from over. During the cocktail hour after the presentation, Sarah once again tried to steal the spotlight. This time, she approached one of the investors and began hinting at Daniel's past. "He's always good at making people fall for him, but commitment was never his strong suit," she said casually, loud enough for Emma to hear. Emma decided not to intervene. She knew Daniel didn't need her protection, but Sarah's words seemed to have planted doubt in the minds of some investors. After, one of the men approached Daniel. "Anderson, it seems like you're changing your approach. Your public support for Emma is impressive, but given your history, is it really genuine?" Daniel squinted, clearly furious. "My support for Emma is based on her talent and work. If that's not convincing enough for you, maybe it's time you reconsider your partnerships." Daniel's powerful response silenced the man, but Emma, watching from afar, saw that his words had had a much stronger impact than she had expected. As the night came to a close, Emma found Daniel outside, gazing at the horizon with a weary expression. "This has been a tense night," she said as she approached. "Isn't that an understatement?" he replied with a thin smile. "You were amazing." "Thank you." But what Sarah said didn't help at all. Daniel sighed, his shoulders heavy. "Sarah knows how to hit where it hurts. She can't stand that I'm trying to change," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma hesitated before replying, "And what about you?" Daniel looked at her, his expression serious. "I'm changing, but not because of her." They shared a moment of silence before Daniel spoke again. "Emma, when I fired you, I thought I was protecting myself. But all I did was push away the only person who made me question who I really am. You showed me that there's another way." His words carried deep emotion, and Emma could feel the walls she had built around herself starting to weaken. "Daniel, change isn't just about words, it's about action," she replied, her voice firm. "Then let me show you," he said, his tone resolute. Emma didn't respond immediately. Part of her wanted to trust him, but another part remained stuck in the past. "We'll see," she said finally. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the company began to shift. Daniel started making bolder moves, like collaborating with sustainable organizations and cutting ties with suppliers who didn't align with the project's values. Emma noticed that he was truly trying to turn his words into actions. One afternoon, as they reviewed the final details for the presentation, Daniel did something that surprised her. "Emma, I need you to know that no matter what happens between us, this project can only succeed because of you," he said. Emma looked at him, trying to find any hint of insincerity in his words, but found nothing. "Thank you," she replied genuinely. Daniel hesitated before continuing, "I know I still have a lot to prove to you, but if you'll allow me, I want to try." Emma knew Daniel's intentions seemed sincere, but something still held her back. Maybe it was the fear of being hurt again, or maybe it was just caution. The final days of the project were a mix of excitement and exhaustion. Emma had dedicated months to the work, but now that the launch day was approaching, she realized it wasn't just a career milestone, it was a personal turning point. Daniel had changed, or at least seemed to, but Emma wasn't sure if she was ready to trust him again. The launch event was planned as a grand affair, with international investors and industry leaders in attendance. As usual, Daniel took on the role of host, but he emphasized that Emma had to be by his side. "You're the heart of this project," he said during their final meeting. "I want everyone to know that." Emma agreed, but with one condition, as long as it's clear that my role here is recognized for my ability, not because of your past or your mistakes. Daniel nodded, fully understanding her resolve. "You've earned this completely," he said. On the morning of the event, Emma arrived early to check the final details. The venue looked perfect, reflecting everything she had envisioned: elegance, function, and sustainability. As she walked through the halls, a mix of pride and anxiety coursed through her. Daniel arrived shortly after, impeccably dressed in a suit, looking confident, but there was something different in his eyes, something vulnerable. Emma couldn't help but sense his anxiety as he approached, and she reluctantly admitted to herself, "Is this how you always are?" He smiled. "With you here, it makes everything easier." Emma turned away, trying to avoid his gaze and the weight of his words. There was something different about Daniel today, an uncharacteristic tenderness she had never seen before. The event began with speeches and presentations highlighting the project's creative aspects. Emma was invited on stage to share her vision and how she had turned ideas into reality. She felt nervous, but when she saw Daniel in the front row, his face filled with sincere pride, she felt more at ease. "This project isn't just about sustainability," she said, wrapping up her speech. "It's about proving that when we work together and trust in the impact we can create, we can make something truly meaningful." The audience erupted into applause, but Daniel's gaze lingered in her heart. After the presentations, a reception was held, and Emma found herself surrounded by people wanting to learn more about her work. She answered each question patiently, but her attention kept drifting to Daniel, who was speaking with a group of investors at the far end of the room. When she finally had a moment to herself, Sarah appeared at the most inconvenient time. "Well, Emma, it looks like you've made an impression. Congratulations." "Thank you," Emma replied, striving to maintain her composure. "But may I ask, do you really think Daniel has changed, or is he still playing the same old games?" Emma didn't respond immediately. There was something calculating in Sarah's voice, as though she was trying to sow seeds of doubt. "It's not your judgment that matters," Emma finally spoke, "it's mine." Sarah chuckled softly, but didn't reply. She simply walked away, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. After, Daniel approached her. "Is Sarah trying to poison your thoughts again?" Emma sighed. "Not exactly, it's just that she made me realize I still have doubts." Daniel remained silent for a moment before responding. "I understand, and honestly, if I were you, I'd doubt me too." Emma looked at him, surprised by his sincerity. "Have you really changed, Daniel, or is this just another attempt to manipulate everything around you?" "I have changed," he replied firmly. "But I don't expect you to believe me just because I say so. I want to prove it over time." Emma didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked away, trying to sort through her emotions. The evening went on, but Emma's unease only deepened. There was something undefined, a tightness in her chest, a knot that wouldn't loosen. When the event ended, Daniel escorted her outside. "Thank you for everything, Emma," he said, his voice sincere. "This project wouldn't be possible without you." Emma nodded, but his words didn't ease her anxiety. "Good job, Daniel, but that doesn't mean everything is resolved." He smiled, though his eyes held a touch of sadness. "I know." In the days that followed, Emma tried to return to her usual work routine, but she couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. He was keeping his promise, his actions proving that. He was trying to change, but Emma still felt fear when it came to trusting that. One morning, Emma received a surprising message from Daniel. "I want you to see something. Can you come to the building today?" Emma hesitated before replying, but her curiosity won out. When she arrived, Daniel greeted her in the lobby, his expression tense, a rare sight. "What do you want to show me?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Follow me," he said, leading her to the building's rooftop. Once they arrived, Emma stood speechless. The space had been transformed into a lush garden, with native trees and a relaxing area that felt like a dream. "I wanted this project to have something special," Daniel explained. "Something that reflects what I've learned working with you." Emma turned to face him, still taking in the surroundings. "This is amazing, Daniel. Thank you." But then she paused, her gaze turning serious. "But this isn't just about the project, it's about you." She felt her heartbeat quicken, her throat dry. Daniel continued, "I know I still have a long way to go," he interrupted her, "but I want to walk that path with you, if you give me the chance." His words were direct, without the manipulative tone she feared. Emma took a deep breath, feeling the walls inside her start to crack. Maybe she could give him a chance. "Okay," she finally said, "but that doesn't mean it will be easy." Daniel smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. "Nothing worth having comes easy, Emma." The relationship between Emma and Daniel seemed to grow stronger, but Emma remained cautious. That moment on the rooftop was symbolic, but she knew trust couldn't be rebuilt in a single day. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed determined to prove his change was real. The following weeks were tense. The project gained more recognition, and Emma was continuously invited to events, interviews, and new partnerships. Daniel always made sure to highlight her talent and contributions whenever possible. However, one thing still bothered her. Daniel seemed to be trying too hard, as if he wanted to make up for his mistakes over the years in just a few weeks. Emma wasn't sure if this was genuine remorse or just an attempt to impress her. One day, Daniel asked Emma to accompany him to a meeting with some new investors. "I don't want to present anything without you," he said. Emma hesitated but eventually agreed. The meeting took place at an upscale restaurant, with investors who were interested in supporting more sustainable projects. Emma confidently presented her ideas while Daniel sat, watching her with admiration. When the meeting ended, one of the investors surprised Emma with a remark. "Daniel, you've truly found a gem. I rarely see such passion and sincerity." Daniel smiled. "She's one of a kind." The compliment was sincere, but Emma couldn't shake the discomfort she felt. She didn't want to be just Daniel's discovery, she wanted to be someone who had built her own path. Later, when they were in the car, Emma finally spoke up. "Daniel, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I want to make one thing clear. My work and my achievements are not tied to you." Daniel seemed surprised but quickly nodded. "I understand, and I'll make sure everyone knows that." Emma realized he was truly listening to her, which made her feel more at ease. As they focused on finalizing the project, an unexpected issue arose. One of the major suppliers was late delivering materials, putting the expansion of the new phase of the building at risk. Determined to solve the problem, Daniel called an urgent team meeting. "We can't let this affect our progress," he said, his voice resolute. "Emma, do you have any ideas on how to solve this?" Emma reviewed the reports and proposed an alternative solution, working with a smaller, but more reliable, local supplier. "It might not be the cheapest option, but it's the most effective." Daniel didn't hesitate, nodding immediately. "Go ahead. We'll deal with the additional costs later." This decision was risky, but it showed that Daniel prioritized the quality and integrity of the project over profit, something Emma noticed and respected. After the crisis, Emma began to see a more steady change in Daniel. He seemed less concerned with public image and more focused on ensuring the success of the project. His small actions also reflected his transformation: genuine praise for the team, ethical decisions, and even moments where he acknowledged his own mistakes. One evening, as they were reviewing the final details of the project, Daniel unexpectedly confessed, "Working with you has made me realize something important." Emma looked at him, curious. "I've spent years trying to meet the expectations of others. My father, the investors, even Sarah. But you've never asked anything of me. You just wanted me to be honest with myself." Emma remained silent, absorbing his words. "So, are you being honest now?" she asked. Daniel nodded with a small smile. "For the first time, I think I am." The project's grand opening ended with an event that brought together influential figures from various industries. Emma and Daniel stood side by side, receiving praise and accolades for their work. The evening seemed perfect, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. During the event, Daniel pulled her aside to a quiet corner. "Emma, there's something I've been practicing to tell you for days now." She looked at him, confused. "What is it?" Daniel took a deep breath before speaking. "I don't know where I'd be without you. This project, my growth, everything started because you came into my life and made me see the world differently." Emma's heart began to race. "Daniel, I know I still have to prove I deserve your trust," he interrupted. "But above all, I want you to know that I admire you so much, not just for your expertise, but for who you are." Emma remained silent, his words so sincere that she couldn't find the right response. Yet she wasn't sure if she was ready to let go of the doubt in her heart. As the event ended, Daniel escorted Emma to her car. "Thank you for being with me tonight," he said. Emma smiled, a soft yet meaningful smile. "You're doing great, Daniel, but it's not over yet," she replied. He chuckled gently, his voice warm. "I know." As the car drove away, Emma glanced at Daniel's reflection in the window, realizing that he was truly trying to change. For the first time, she felt like she could trust him. In the days that followed, Daniel continued to surprise her. He got involved in social causes, supported young entrepreneurs, and funded sustainable initiatives. Emma noticed that he was doing it with genuine belief, not just to impress her. One afternoon, while working in her studio, Emma received a message from Daniel: "Come to the building, I want to show you something." When she arrived, Daniel was on the rooftop. He had installed a mural depicting the stories of people whose lives had been positively changed by the project. "I thought this was a good way to remember why we started this project," he explained. Emma stared at the mural, her eyes welling up. "It's beautiful, Daniel," she whispered. He looked at her with a sincere smile. "Just like you." Emma gazed at the mural, and she realized that maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to trust him again. In the days following the project's final event, Emma experienced a mix of peace and reflection. The building officially opened, receiving praise from experts in architecture and sustainable design. Her name was now recognized not just domestically but internationally, something she had never imagined could happen. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed more distant. He focused on new projects and was busy with meetings to expand the business. However, Emma knew he was intentionally giving her space to make her own decisions. While working in her studio, Emma received an unexpected invitation to attend an international conference on sustainable design. It was a huge opportunity, but it would mean being away for several weeks. Before confirming her participation, she decided to speak with Daniel. She walked past the receptionist at Anderson Enterprises and directly into his office. Daniel looked surprised to see her. "Emma, this is a surprise. Is everything okay?" "Yes," she replied. "But I wanted to talk to you before making my decision." Daniel set his papers aside and gestured for her to continue. "What's going on?" "I've been invited to attend an international conference. It's an opportunity to expand my brand, but I'd have to be gone for a few weeks." Daniel studied her for a moment before smiling. "That's great, Emma. You should go." Emma felt A wave of relief washed over her after his response. "Thank you. I just thought you should be the first to know." Daniel nodded. "I want you to know I'll always support you." His voice was full of sincerity, catching Emma off guard. She felt a strange warmth in her chest but kept it to herself. This trip was a turning point in her career. She met with renowned experts, shared her story, and was invited to collaborate with companies from other countries. As she spoke about her projects, she realized that even though she was far away, the lessons on leadership and vision that Daniel had taught her were present in everything she did. Yet, despite the success, there was a gap she couldn't ignore. During quiet nights in her hotel, she thought about Daniel. His words, his actions, the way he looked at her. His image seemed to linger in her mind. When she returned to the city, Emma decided to go straight to Anderson Enterprises. It was late, but she knew Daniel might still be there. When she entered his office, she found him sitting alone, going over reports. Daniel looked up from his papers, smiling in surprise. "Emma, I didn't know you were coming back today," he said. "I just got here," she replied, closing the door behind her. "But I need to talk to you." He immediately stood up, concerned. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," Emma answered, her voice trembling. "I realized something important while I was away." Daniel fell silent, watching her intently. His eyes glistened with vulnerability, as if he knew this moment was significant. "What is it?" he asked. Emma took a few steps toward him, trying to find the right words. "On this trip, I realized that you've changed so much. I realized that you're no longer the arrogant, distant person I first met. And I realized that, no matter how hard I try to fight it, I've fallen in love with you." The words rushed out quickly, as if they had been waiting too long to be spoken. Daniel stood still for a moment, thinking, but then he stepped toward her, closing the distance between them. "Emma, you have no idea how long I've been waiting to hear that," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. She tried to speak, but he continued, gently taking her hand. "I've loved you for so long, since the moment you came into my life. Everything changed because of you. You've made me want to be a better person. You've made me realize that everything I built before didn't matter unless it was for something greater." Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "Daniel, I was scared, scared to trust, scared to open my heart, scared of being hurt again. But now, I don't want to run anymore." Without another word, Daniel leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss full of emotion, as if they were pouring everything they had held back into it. When they finally pulled away, he smiled at her. "Emma, you've changed me, not just as a businessman but as a person. I want to walk beside you, not just today but forever. Will you be my girlfriend?" Emma smiled, still emotional, and placed her hand on his face. "Yes, Daniel, I will." In the following months, Emma and Daniel began to build something they had never expected, a relationship based on trust, respect, and love. Daniel continued to surprise her with small gestures of care, while Emma learned to trust him completely. Together, they began to dream big. Emma expanded her brand, while Daniel became involved in social projects and sustainable initiatives, inspired by the values she had brought into his life. On one special evening, as they launched a new space they had designed together, Daniel held Emma's hand while the crowd cheered for them. He looked into her eyes, his lips curving into an emotional smile, and said, "Emma, you've changed my life in so many ways. I want to build not just projects with you, but a life." Before she could respond, he knelt down, opening a small box with a simple yet elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, but without hesitation she replied, "Yes, Daniel, yes." Their wedding was peaceful, meaningful, and attended only by close friends and family. For Emma and Daniel, it was not just the beginning of a new chapter, but a confirmation that true love can blossom in the most unexpected places. As they sat side by side, holding hands and gazing at the horizon during their honeymoon, Emma felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. She knew the future would bring challenges, but she was ready to face them because she had learned how to love and trust. This story reminds us of the power of change and the belief in new opportunities. If you were in Emma's shoes, would you be able to put aside your doubts and open your heart to trust again? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire others to find the strength to change. If you found this story meaningful, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and loved ones to spread the message of love, trust, and second chances. Thank you for following and supporting. Let's create positive change together, step by step, with purpose. Wishing you always a heart full of trust and success on your journey. Do you think Emma was right to forgive and marry Daniel? Leave your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding.